Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Forever Evil, the newest base set for the DC Comics deck building game from Cryptozoic Entertainment. Now, I've reviewed the other DC Comics games, the two base sets that they have, the original, oh so originally named DC Comics deck building game, and then the sequel, Heroes Unite. This is another base set, which means you can play it by yourself or mix it with the other ones by swapping out equipment and powers between the different sets and so on, and mix all of the different heroes together. The difference here, first off, is theme. I mean, well, the theme is still as pacing on as ever, but now you're taking control of the supervillains of the DC Comics universe instead of as the heroes, and you're fighting through the superhero stack instead of the supervillain stack. Otherwise, the game plays mostly the same as the previous editions of the game, with a couple of little differences. One is that this game emphasizes attack much more than the previous sets. It also has a lot more ways to destroy cards in your deck, or in the lineup, and even gives you rewards for doing so. Also, this is the first set to feature victory point tokens, meaning that in previous sets, victory points were something that you just gained from cards. The cards themselves would tell you whether you gained victory points, negative victory points, and whatever the total was, and you just add them up at the end. You still do that here, but now during the course of the game, you may actually gain victory point tokens to keep track of and add to your points at the end. There's some other interesting little things like freezing cards, but we'll get to that in a brief overview of the new cards that come in the set. I'm not going to explain everything. You can go and watch my review of the DC Comics deck building game and also the Naruto deck building game, where I do a thorough overview because they're basically the same game. But we'll look at some of the new cards in this set, then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright people, I'm just going to run you through some of the new stuff that comes in the Forever Evil set of the DC Comics deck building game. I'm not going to go through every single thing. I just picked out some cards and characters that I thought were pretty interesting, and I'll go over a couple of the new mechanics. Actually, I guess I'll cover those now because they're kind of glaringly obvious if you don't know much about this new set. They've introduced the concept of victory point tokens. So you have tokens, they come in 1s, 5s, and 10s, because certain cards and abilities during the course of the game will actually give you those victory point tokens. So at the end of the game, you're not just adding up your point total on your cards, you have to add however many victory point tokens you've gained as well. The other thing are these cold markers. There, I believe there's only one card, the Captain Cold card, which I'll show you in a second, who can put this token out on cards in the lineup. Whenever it's got a freeze token on it, you'll remove it at a predetermined time. I think if there's only Captain Cold, then it's at the start of your next turn. But until that happens, you cannot, no one can purchase that card. It is frozen in place. And I actually think that, as sort of seemingly insignificant as that is, it's probably the most thematic thing I have yet to see in the DC Comics deck building game. But anyways, moving on. Now, unfortunately, this set comes with new starter cards, and I'll talk more about why I think that's unfortunate in my my final thoughts. But just to show you the artwork on it, because at least they changed the artwork. You have Punch, and remember, I guess if it's not glaringly obvious, you are taking control of all the supervillains in this set. So all the artwork is themed that way. Lex Luthor punching Batman, because we all know how many times that happened. Apparently once. Vulnerability, that's Black Adam. Weakness, even though that's Green Lantern for some reason. Maybe that's Evil Green Lantern. And then there's Kick, which has got Harley Quinn. All those cards function exactly the same as they do in the other DC Comics deck building game sets. Now you also have the new supervillain character cards, which as far as I can tell, you can just freely mix these in with the other superheroes from the other sets, or if you're playing with the other Cerberus Engine sets, you can mix them all together because they still function exactly the same. They're just supervillain themed. I actually think it might be fun to put these into Street Fighter. Oh, anyways. Bane is actually a promo character. You get him in the first printing of the game. So I don't know if whenever you're watching this, if you're going to be able to get him, but chances that now all these promos end up in the Board Game Geek store, so there is hope even if you weren't able to get him. But Bane's ability is, I should mention that the sort of the focus of this set is easily destroying cards, gaining those victory point tokens, and having a lot of attacks. So the game is a little more vicious than previous sets. Bane says, if the first card you play during each of your turns has cost 1 or greater, you may destroy it, and if you do, you gain +2 power. Now, in the past, that would be good, but not necessarily great, except that this set really encourages you to destroy cards. It's really not a big deal if you destroy a bunch of cards. You really want to, so that's actually really good. good. Then we have Deathstroke, and I don't know, I like Deathstroke a lot, just as a character, so I'm glad he's represented here. He gets +1 power for each card destroyed during his turn, which, again, in previous sets that wouldn't be that great because you're not destroying cards that often, but it happens a lot with this set. But that does mean that you probably don't want to mix him up with other sets too much unless you're using a lot of card destruction cards. Sinistro, another one of my favorite villains. When one or more foes fail to avoid an attack that you play, you gain a victory point. You'll actually take one of the tokens. The first time you gain victory points during each of your turns, you actually get to draw a card as well. That's a pretty amazing ability. Black Adam, I like his ability quite a bit. The first time you play a superpower card during each of your turns, the orange ones, you may destroy it. And if you do, draw a card and gain a victory point. Kill those kicks. Do it. It's the best thing to do. And Bizarro, who probably has the craziest power out of all of them. When you destroy a card, you must gain a weakness. During your turn, you may put 2 weakness cards from your discard pile on top of the weakness stack. And if you do, you draw a card. And you can do that multiple times, which is, again, really, really powerful. And there's a lot of things that will give you weaknesses in this game. Speaking of that, let's look at the superheroes. Now, instead of these, since you're playing as the supervillains, there is no supervillain stack to run through in order to end the game. Instead, you have a superhero stack. And I'm going to talk about Wonder Woman first because she is the only female hero in the superhero stack, which is kind of, emblematic of the problems over at DC. But I'll go ahead and give her due now. Wonder Woman, her first appearance attack is that each player destroys a villain in his hand or discard pile, and if they cannot, they must gain a weakness. Now, almost all of the first attacks are something similar to that. You must either discard or destroy cards, or you have to gain a weakness. That's how this game is kind of themed. Her special ability, boy, her text is tiny. If you actually gain her in your deck, you may play up to 3 villains with cost 6 or less from the destroyed pile, and then put them on the bottom of the main deck. If you choose not to, you can instead just gain +3 power. Alright, moving on. The Flash is the Ra's al Ghul of this set. He starts on the top of the stack. If you gain him, you draw 3 cards and then discard a card. Green Arrow, there's the CW's lineup right there. When you play this card, leave it in front of you for the rest of the game. Ongoing, punch cards you play have an additional +1 power. He is really awesome to get early. His first appearance attack is that each player discards 2 punch cards. For each punch you fail to discard, gain a weakness. So this thing is all about making you do stuff, and if you can't do it, gain weaknesses. Green Lantern is the same as Wonder Woman, except that he is keyed onto hero cards. So you can put use heroes from the destroyed pile and put them on the bottom of the deck, or gain +3 power. Batman. Batman says that you may play up to 3 equipment cards with cost 6 or less. He's the version of Green Lantern and Wonder Woman, but key to equipment. His first appearance attack is that each player destroys an equipment in the hand or discard pile, or if not, gains a weakness. And you have Constantine. I'm just going to blow through these. And, of course, Superman. I happen to think that Superman is one of the worst heroes that DC has to offer, but I'm showing him because he's Superman. Anyways, let's go through some of the new main deck cards that we have. You have new location cards, like you have Earth 3 here, and these function the same as the old locations. Some of them have to do with gaining victory points. So once during each of your turns, you can reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a punch, destroy it to gain a victory points. You have Star Labs. That was Earth 3, by the way. You have Star Labs, +1 power for each equipment you have in play. Now here's some of the other types of cards, just in no particular order. Element Woman is interesting because she has +2 powers, and when you play her, she counts as also a superpower, equipment, and villain. This is pretty versatile because there's a lot of different cards that only destroy or enhance particular types of cards in this set. Transmutation lets you destroy a card in your hand or discard pile and gain a victory point, but also you can gain a card from the lineup of equal or lesser cost than the card that you destroyed that way. Amanda Waller. There's a lot of cards that are like Amanda Waller that affect different types of cards. So for her, she can destroy a card in her hand or discard pile. If it's a villain, you gain power equal to its cost. Otherwise, you just get +2 power. Atomica, again, she's just one example of several different cards that affect different types. She can destroy a non-villain card in her hand or discard pile. If its cost is 1 or greater, gain a victory point. There's other cards like Steel, who says destroy a non-hero card to do the same thing. Bizarro Power, +4 power, and you gain a weakness, but the attack is that each foe also gains a weakness, but this card is one of the few main deck cards that's worth -1 victory point. Ultra Strength, this is like the killer card in the game, which is just very simply gain +3 power and draw 2 cards. That's just amazing. Firestorm has a couple of really interesting cards. his hero card here says that you may put the top card of your deck on your supervillain. This card has the game text of each card on your supervillain this turn. So that's actually, it's not may, you have to do that. But that means that this card gets amazingly powerful as you continue. Firestorm Matrix is a very interesting card. You put place the top card of your deck, or play it. If its costs are 5 or less, you may destroy this card. And if you do, you leave that card that you played ongoing in the field, and you can use it once per turn. Pandora's Box is very odd. You play the card, and then you reveal the top card of the main deck, then add it with whatever the cost of that card is, you add that many cards to the lineup, including itself. So it's just like you enhance and keep increasing the lineup. Cosmic Staff is main powers as a defense card. You can use it to defend against an attack, and if you do, you gain the bottom card of the main deck. Very powerful card here from Sinistro, +3 power, and the attack list makes each foe discard 2 cards. I have these flipped up. Word of Power is an example of a card in this set whose only use is to be destroyed. When you destroy this card in any zone, you may pay 4 less to defeat superheroes this turn. But that is all that it does. So it can be powerful, but it can also be incredibly weak. The Cold Gun, this is what I referenced earlier with the cold tokens. +1 power, but you can put a frozen token on a card until the start of your next turn. The Blight is one example of several different types of cards. Again, keyed into different types of cards. In fact, I think this is, this one is you may destroy a card in your hand or discard pile. If it's a superpower, you gain power equal to its cost. So you remember Amanda Waller was like that, but it was for villains. The Royal Flush Gang is the new Suicide Squad of this set, which means the more of them you have, the better they get. Draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards, and also gain a victory point for each of the Royal Flush Gang you play or have played this turn. So they get better and better and better. Expert Marksman lets you destroy a superpower card in your hand or discard a non-superpower card in your hand or discard pile. If its cost is 1 or greater, gain a victory point. Okay, Deathstorm. There's actually a hero analog of this called the Phantom Stranger, and it's very interesting because you can destroy a card, and you may destroy a card in your hand. At the end of the game, this card is worth 1 less victory points for every card in excess of 20 you have in your deck. You'll notice that right now it's worth 10 victory points, so he's better the more cards you destroy. Power Ring lets you destroy a hero in the lineup, and you gain +1 power for every destroyed hero in the destroyed hero pile. Finally, one of the coolest cards in the game, probably the coolest card in the game, is Pandora. You add the top card of the main deck to the lineup, and you gain +1 power for every different card cost among the cards in the lineup. So actually, while Pandora's Box on its own is not that great, if you have Pandora in Pandora's Box, you could have an awesome combo right there. So that's not everything that's cool in the game, but that's just most of the stuff that I thought was worth pointing out. It's just more and more of the same of the DC Comics deck building game with a couple of interesting twists. So let's get to my final thoughts. Forever Evil is a solid set in the DC deck builder line, or I guess I should say the Cerberus engine line of games from Cryptozoic Entertainment. But I will stress the exact same thing I've stressed in all of my reviews of the expansions for the DC deck builder or any of the Cryptozoic deck building games, in that you will not have your minds changed by this game for any reason. Unless you really, really, really wanted more like kind of vicious interaction between the players or card destruction in the original deck builder, DC deck builder. If that was like your one hang up, then yeah, you'll love this game. But other than that, this game is very, very similar to the other versions. There's nothing like tremendously new. But for the people who have enjoyed the DC deck builder and its little spin-off offshoots like Street Fighter and Naruto like I have, then there actually is some really cool stuff here. And I don't know if it's enough to elevate this and make it sort of the best of these. I still think Street Fighter and Naruto have much more interesting mechanics and better use of the theme, and even the some of the card combos present in the first 2 base sets of the DC deck builder are a little more interesting to me, but there's some cool stuff to be had here. Well, one thing I'll say, and just as a little side note here, I'm getting kind of sick of the base sets coming for the DC deck builder. We've already had 2, and now we have Forever Evil making a 3rd one, and they've announced the Teen Titans set, which from my understanding will be another base set. I find this completely unnecessary, and I mean, they're just doing it because they can get more money. If they sell it as a base set, they can charge a little bit more for it, and there you have it. But there's no reason for this to exist like this. Yes, there's a lot of new cards in these sets, but None of them are that, a lot of them, well, I should say a lot of them are not that radically different, and I don't know that we need multiple copies of some of these cards. We definitely don't need more punches, kicks, weaknesses. It's a little silly at this point. So that's like my general gripe about it, aside from this individual game itself. I just don't think we need more base sets. But okay, moving on from that. There's a lot of cool cards to be had here. First off, I have to say there's a new Suicide Squad-ish card. The Suicide Squad from the original DC deck builder was a card that got more powerful the more of it you had, meaning if you had, I can't remember, it's either 3 or 4 of them in your hand at a time, you'd make every other player discard all the cards in their hand, which was like brutally, it's just crippling to do that. It was incredibly powerful. This game's version of that is the Royal Flush Gang, and I find that one of the most interesting parts about the game, but also one of the most broken parts. It is very easy to just do that, and if no one stops you from getting the Royal Flush cards, and because card destruction is so overwhelmingly prevalent in this version of the game, it's very easy to get an engine going where you're drawing the Royal Flushes constantly and constantly getting more and more and more points, and it gets to be a little embarrassing at times when you grab so many points. And I've been on the both ends of that, doing it to my opponent, and then when we were playing one-on-one, and then in another game where I played 4 players, where there was one player who was just harvesting those tokens, and of course they won. So it's really cool, and it's really powerful, and it's another one of those things like the Suicide Squad where you need to be on the lookout for it and make sure that someone's not really getting that engine going. But although it's even worse here, again, because of the card destruction and having thinner decks. But that's like an individual example of a card that I thought was notable here. Let's talk in general about the card destruction. I like it. I like that aspect of it a lot. It's probably my favorite thing about this, because I think that's one of like if I were to give like staples of what a deck building game should be and what makes a great deck building game, thinning out your deck would be one of them. I mean, it's just obvious. At this point, it's as sort of a character. It's as much a characteristic of a deck builder as actually taking cards into your deck and making a deck. Making your deck thinner in order to make it better, to get your engine going smoother. It's really cool, and it's something that hasn't always been present in the Cerberus engine deck builders as it should be. And I like that there's so many different options for doing it here, because it's not just, destroying cards in your deck and making it thinner and destroying the crappy punches and vulnerabilities, although you can certainly get a lot of that done. Now there's cards that if you destroy them in any sector, whether it's the lineup, whether it's your hand, your discard pile, they'll give you special abilities like the Steve Trevor card, which lets you draw a couple cards and discard. Otherwise he's like a useless card, except that you can destroy him, which is really cool. And then there's cards that, like the Power Ring card, where the more heroes that you destroy and play that card, then you get more and more power from that card. I think there's a version of that for like every type of card as well. There's really interesting one-shot cards, like I can't remember the name of it, but one of the cards that has Black Adam on it. You destroy it, it has no other use other than if you destroy it, you are able to defeat a superhero, which is this game's version of the supervillains, for 4 less. And I just think that's a really interesting concept. I actually wanted to see more of that. There's another card, I think is Deathstorm, who says that he's worth 10 victory points, and you play him and can destroy a card in your hand. That's all that he does, except that he's worth 1 less victory point for every card over 20 in your deck at the end of the game. So it's really, really encouraging you to just destroy every card that you can. I really enjoy that. I just think it's a great concept, and it really forced me to think outside of the box, because there's some games where I'm like, yeah, destroy punches and vulnerabilities, or in Dominion, yeah, destroy coppers, absolutely, that's a fantastic thing. But if it was like a kick, I would think twice about it, because I'd be like, well, yeah, it's just a kick, but it's +2 power, and it's a victory point. Why would I destroy it? In this game, they are gone. See ya! Especially if you're playing a character like Black Adam, who actually gives you more bonuses for destroying superpowers, which kicks are. No kick lasted in my deck. No kick. And I think that's a really great concept. So that's the thing I enjoy most about Forever Evil. Other things, there is more attack in this game, or I guess and my feeling was that attacks were just more vicious in this game. Both games that I played in, I was taking a lot of different weaknesses, and it can be brutal. And also the attacks from the superheroes are much more I think they're much more brutal because again, this is another way that you're taking tons and tons of weaknesses and you're having to mandatorily having to discard cards that could potentially be very powerful. So I thought they were all pretty vicious. But again, I think that because of that and because of the fact that you're destroying so many cards and having a leaner, more efficient deck, it sort of balances out because you can kind of take that. You can destroy weaknesses much easier than you can. Not as easy as a Street Fighter deck builder where you can just put them back on the stack when you play them. But that's a different beast altogether. So I hesitate to say that this game really has more player interaction. It still feels the same as it did before. Like, okay, I'm making an attack. You. Okay, I'll attack you. I mean, this isn't like Star Realms where you're just directly attacking someone's hit points where it has sort of that magic meets deck building type feel. This is still the DC Comics deck builder. It's just that you're doing more of some of the things that were less pronounced in the past of the game. There's a lot of different other interesting cards that I really liked. Powering card is probably one of my favorite. I like Pandora. That's like a way overpowered card, but super cool. It's another where you get a +1 power for every different cost card in the lineup, and she adds one to it. Pandora's box is probably one of the cards I don't like because I just think it's kind of dumb. I think it just loads up the lineup with cards, and then it kind of eliminates some of the limiting factors of like if one player is not doing so well, maybe they're at least able to get a really cool card in their turn that no one else can. But if there's 20 cards in the lineup, it kind of eliminates that aspect of the game and it just kind of makes it clunky. So that's one of the things I don't like, one of the cards I don't like so much in this set. But everything else is pretty cool. I mean, I like that there's different versions of some of the cards. Like there's a card that lets you destroy cards for victory points and key to like every type of card. Destroy a superpower, destroy a villain. There's a card for every one of those types, and that can be very interesting because if you're focusing on one particular thing, which your supervillain cards kind of lend you to doing, now you have cards that you can custom tailor your deck for. And again, you're destroying tons of cards, so now you're getting that engine going more smoothly, and that's really much more pronounced. So I like this set a lot. I like the characters and some of the more interesting cards from the first two base sets of the DC deck builder a little bit better, but I like the mechanic improvements here much more than those. So if you're coming to this game for the first time, I doubt most people who are watching this I'm sure most people who have watched this have already made up their minds and either hate the game or own it. And if you hate the game, I'm not sure why you're watching this, just to be masochistic. If for some reason you haven't gotten a set before and you're wondering which one to get, take what I said and think about it. Because if you're the type that just wants to play more solitaire type and more be more of a pacifist, and you don't like the idea of potentially destroying really useful cards because it just feels wrong to you in some way, you might not want to start with this set, or just look at what the different characters you can play as and see whether or not that appeals to you, because maybe you don't like the idea of playing as villains, even if the theme is not that strong. Maybe you like the heroes from the other sets. That's really what it's going to boil down to. But if you're like me and you want to have everything, this is another solid entry, and I hate the fact that it's a base set, but you should still probably get it. That's the Forever Evil set of the DC Comics deck building game from Cryptozoic Entertainment.